Hey, so my name is Caitlin, and the assessment that I decided to research is the audit, or otherwise known as the Alcohol Use Disorders Identification Test. The reason that I chose to research this assessment is that I currently am actually a PRN, or as needed, substance use counselor at Atrium Health Wake Forest Baptist. I primarily counsel people that have been through traumas such as a house fire, a car accident, shootings, and so many other different things. And if they test positive for substances or come in with a high blood alcohol level, we will also go ahead and tack on that substance use intervention. When doing a substance use intervention, I typically do start with CAGE, just to introduce the conversation of substances to see where they are at in their level of change. I also have started to disclose the reason why I am asking these questions. So I would typically tell them, hey, if it is okay with you, I would love to ask you a few questions about your drug and alcohol use, because you did come in with a pretty high alcohol level and you did test positive for THC. And I found that by doing this, it gets it out in the air that I know about the substance use. I do occasionally have patients still that will tell me that the test was wrong or I have the wrong patient, and that just tells me that they are at a pre-contemplative stage of change, and since the trauma is our primary concern at that moment, I'll then end the substance use intervention and then just focus on the trauma. If after I complete the CAGE with a patient who has a high alcohol level and they are at a contemplative stage, I then ask them if I can do another assessment that would help us see where they are at with their alcohol use. I don't use the audit every single day, just because I see a lot of patients with other substances in their system, and audit is only used for alcohol. So I'm always trying to strive to learn more about the assessment and how to deliver it. So without further ado, let's get into and explore the audit. An article by London et al. Said the Alcohol Use Disorders Identification Test, or audit, was developed by the World Health Organization as a self-report screening test to identify alcohol disorders. The 10-item scale covers 3 symptom areas: hazardous use, dependent symptoms, and harmful use. All item scores range from 0 to 4 and are commonly summarized to provide an overall measure of hazardous drinking. For me, I really find the word self-report interesting. As someone who is counseling those in the hospital who have just experienced a trauma where they may not be able to move a lot or use their hands, means that I have to deliver the assessment verbally and record their answers, which takes a level of privacy away, I feel like, which can be a limitation within this assessment. We as humans also fear judgment a lot, so answering a question verbally can be more difficult than just writing it down. So I would almost guarantee that my patients may answer differently if they were able to answer the questions privately or on a screen. So hopefully that's some technology we can improve on in our hospital system. But even if it's on like an iPad or a computer, still, if you're not able to move your hands, that can be quite difficult. So, however, my supervisor always says that even if the patient doesn't answer truthfully, at the very least, you are getting them to think about the questions that you're asking, which is a big goal within a substance use intervention, to just get them thinking about it. Another article by Dawson et al. States that in the 2 samples of U.S. Veteran Affairs patients, the audit C performed slightly better than the standard 10-item audit in predicting heavy/hazardous drinking, whereas the audit performed slightly better than the audit C in predicting active alcohol abuse or dependence. One of the things that is important to state is that you can actually be positive of the audit, is that it's shortened to only 3 questions. So you can do the audit C, which is how often have you had a drink of alcohol in the past year? How many drinks do you have when you are drinking? And how often have you had more than 4 drinks on one occasion for men and more than 3 drinks on one occasion for women? It is nice to be able to shorten the assessment because the entire assessment can feel like overkill. It can be a lot. And a positive to the Audit C is that if you have an ANSI patient, you can just ask these first 3 questions and still have some data to run with. However, like we see with these patients who are veterans, there seems to be conflicting and different results between the 2 different assessments, even though they are the same thing essentially. I think it is important to remember that it differs from patient to patient what you do assessment-wise, and unless you are using assessments for research, then the assessments are there to help guide the intervention, and that truly does look different between each patient. With that being said, we also are able to see how different populations, such as veterans, may answer a certain assessment, and we may be able to have the knowledge in the back of our heads of what that specific person may answer, and therefore what other resources we can provide them with. In an attempt to understand what delivering the audit looks like when you deliver it to different cultures, I came across this article that actually went into a study where they assessed individuals for alcohol use disorder in Nepal. One of the things that I want to preface is just how recent it was in history that medical professionals said, hey, it actually might not be that healthy for you to binge drink every day. I think it took so long for us as a society to come to terms with that because alcohol is a part of almost every single culture and even religion. For example, in the Bible, we read that one of Jesus's very first miracles was when he went to a wedding, and weddings back then were huge, lasted around 7 days, and it was just a huge party. Everyone was drinking. They had wine, but they ran out of the good wine. So they had Jesus create a higher quality of wine. I'm not saying that we need to blame Jesus or any religious figure for people having substance use disorders, but that just shows you how long alcohol has been a part of culture and religion. So it's to no surprise that there are still some cultures that still haven't grasped the negative effects of heavy alcohol use. In the article by Pradhan et al. States, this study reveals high prevalence of alcohol use disorders and hazardous drinking in Nepal. The Nepali version of audit can be used as a reliable and valid tool for early detection and diagnosis of individuals with alcohol use disorders in a busy clinical setting with a cutoff greater than or equal to 11 for alcohol dependence, greater than or equal to 9 for all alcohol use disorders for both genders. Earlier, I stated that I typically start with the CAGE to determine the level of change in an individual before I even introduce the audit, but now I'm actually wondering if it would be better if when I have an individual from a different culture to just go into the audit, because one of the very first questions in the CAGE assessment is, have you ever felt that you should cut down on drinking or drug use? And in some cultures, it may be acceptable to have 10 beers a day, therefore it may never cross the patient's mind that they should cut down on drinking. With further research, I decided to jump the map a little bit over to Iran, and Norbakush et al. Really opened my eyes to what alcohol use looks like over there. He stated, in developing countries, the alcohol use disorder prevalence rate is often lower than in developed ones, yet it remains problematic. After opioids, alcohol use disorder is the most serious addictive problem in Iran, a developing Islamic country located in the Middle East where the majority of Iranians are Muslim. According to Islamic law, the use of alcoholic beverages is forbidden. Moreover, selling, buying, or manufacturing alcoholic beverages is also illegal. Thus, alcohol is not readily accessible, and there are no advertisements, TV, magazines, etc., or promotional sales. However, illegal alcoholic beverages are available in Iran and include neutral spirits purchased from drugstores, a handmade, liquor obtained from distillation of raisins containing at least 65% pure ethanol, wine that is handmade and bottled, whiskey and illegal importation, mainly from Iraq, beer, handmade and canned, and etc. Normally, the price of these products is beyond the purchasing power of most people. I think this is a perfect example of how even when a society bans alcohol, we still have people that struggle with alcohol use disorder. And since it is banned in their country, I would imagine that there are very little resources for them, since their culture and society has surrounded them with so much shame, which is incredibly sad. I was incredibly shocked at how Iran is drastically different than Nepal when it comes to alcohol use. With Nepal, I was thinking that if I administered the audit to someone from that culture, if they would even see a problem with their drinking. But with Iran, I am wondering how accurate the audit results would be, because I would imagine that they would be fearful of what their country and government would do to them if they found out that they were struggling with a substance use disorder. And I think that this just further shows how important it is to stress confidentiality in order to make your patient safe, because we never want them to be scared that someone will find out what they disclose to us. So as you can tell, I really love looking into different cultures. I do this with all assessments in all areas of counseling, but let's head on over to Malaysia to talk about what their culture looks like with alcohol use disorder. So Yi et al. States, in Malaysia, alcohol influences most crimes and contributes to sexual and violent assaults, suicide, and road traffic accidents, leading to mortality and serious injuries. Research conducted in Malaysia has reported high underage drinking and driving under the influence. This is partly explained by the easy availability of cheap alcohol, which is affordable by all, regardless of socioeconomic status or age. One of the unique features of alcohol use in Malaysia is the availability of inexpensive local drinks called toddy and samsu. Toddy, with 4 to 6% alcohol content, is made from fermenting the sap of coconut palm. Samsu, on the other hand, is a locally distilled spirit with a high alcohol content of 37 to 70%. These two types of drinks are usually used by the poor rural people. In West Malaysia, the indigenous people of Sabah and Sarawak consume homemade rice wines called tuak or tapai with potent alcohol contents. These drinks are popular, especially during tribal festivals and community gatherings. Refusal to drink when offered by hosts is regarded as a breach of etiquette, hence indirectly contributing to the incidence of alcohol use disorders among the indigenous tribes. This is just another example where we see that alcohol use may be higher because of the fact that it is such a big part of their culture. This is also the first country where we hear about underage drinking. So I think that it would be interesting to look into if the audit would be an appropriate assessment, or if the craft would be better to assess these underage individuals from Malaysia. A big question that I think still looms in my head is, can the audit be used as a preventative measure, or can it really only be used as a tool to detect heavy drinking? Saunders et al. States, in practice, however, audit may be used more frequently when embedded within a broadly based lifestyle questionnaire than as a discrete alcohol screening instrument. I think this proves that this assessment can be picked apart to not be as harsh and heavy, and certain questions can be taken to tailor it to different patients based on their age, gender, and culture. I'll always stand by the fact that for each patient, it is different, and part of our roles as counselors is to not be afraid to change course and direction in order to help benefit the patient, because at the end of the day, we are here to serve them, not the assessment. In conclusion, I believe that Rayner et al. Says it best by saying, research consistently confirms the validity of the English version, with sensitivities and specificities comparable to and generally exceeding those of other alcohol screening methods. The audit in its shorter version, the Audit C, are psychometrically sound, brief, easy to score, relatively free of cultural bias, and available without royalty fee. Obviously, it is important for further research to take place about this assessment, and changes should always be welcome, but overall, I think that this assessment is highly useful when it comes to assessing others who may struggle with a substance use disorder.